Welcome to Real Talk, where we dive into the raw, engaging, authentic, and lived experiences that inspire and inform. I'm Michelle Badusky, your host, and I believe that the hardest conversations to have are the ones we need the most. This is a safe space for real talk that challenges perspective, sparks growth, and pushes boundaries. No filters, no fluff, just real talk. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hey everyone, it is Michelle Badusky here. I had a really interesting conversation the other day regarding the timeline between the day I got my colonoscopy to the day I found out I was cancer-free. And it came from a conversation that started when I was celebrating August 1st, because August 1st was an anniversary. Well, kind of like an anniversary. So August 1st, last week, 2025, was exactly 1 year from the day that I had the colonoscopy that found my cancer. Now, that colonoscopy came after months and months of dealing with digestive issues. So I had a lot of symptoms starting in about maybe February of 2024. I was 49 years old. I was starting menopause, like perimenopause. I hadn't had a period in a couple months, and then was having some digestive issues. So bloating, gas, constipation. And I assumed, like many women my age, that these symptoms had to do with perimenopause. So I ignored them for a while. And then when they started getting worse, and I mean worse to the point where I was having trouble going to the bathroom. So I'd feel like I really needed to poop. And I would go, and I'd only have a little bit. I never felt like I could actually empty my bowels. And then I'd notice my stool was floating. Sometimes there was some blood in there. It was very mucousy, and it was kind of gross. So I assumed, like many of us do, that it was my diet, because I was kind of eating crap. It was winter. I was really busy at work. I'd sit at a desk all day. I wasn't being very active. I was tired all the time. I didn't feel like I'd kind of let myself go to the point where I wasn't doing yoga. I wasn't exercising because I didn't feel good. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I assumed, like many of us do, that it was my fault, that I was doing something wrong, that I wasn't doing enough. So I kind of made a point of going back to the gym, working out, eating better. And the more I tried to do, the worse I felt. So I was going to the gym and I was exercising and I was dragging my butt there. But it wasn't helping. It wasn't making me feel better. And then I changed my diet. So I started eating more whole foods, more raw foods, lots of salads, lots of fiber. I cut out, all the crap I was eating. And still, I didn't feel good. I still couldn't go to the bathroom. I was walking around I felt like there was this weight low in my bowels, like I was carrying a bowling ball between my butt cheeks. It was awful, and it was going on for months. And same thing, a lot more blood in my stool, hemorrhoids, and all those things that you don't talk about. And I assumed, again, that it was, my fault, my diet, my lack of exercise. Even though I was eating better and I was working out more, obviously I wasn't doing enough, right? So I finally brought myself to go see the doctor. And my doctor took some blood tests, suggested maybe that, this is a complication of perimenopause, that maybe it was triggering some kind of food intolerance. So I went gluten and dairy free. Now for me, that was an incredibly hard thing to do because I love cheese. I love dairy. I live off of, bread. And I love all of these things. And I gave them up trying to feel better. And my life sucked. I mean, my life didn't suck, but I felt like it sucked because I wasn't eating the things that I really enjoyed. And I felt like crap. I wasn't getting better. Because when I cut out gluten and dairy, you know what I started eating more of? Salads. I started eating lots of high fiber foods and whole grains and all of those things that you're supposed to eat. Well, we know now in retrospect that I couldn't digest all that high fiber, that the healthier I ate, the sicker I was getting because my body couldn't digest it because I had a tumor. Didn't know that at the time. But as my symptoms got worse and I got more miserable, I went back to my doctor, who suggested a colonoscopy as a last resort because we've tried everything. So by now it's July, June, somewhere around there of 2024. So I'd been dealing with this for 6 or 7 months. I got my appointment for my colonoscopy on August 1st, 2024. So the night before I did the prep, and it was awful. Like, there's got to be a better way than drinking 4 liters of this ice cold stuff. Like, I stayed up all night because my colonoscopy was in the morning. I didn't sleep, but I needed to get it done. I wanted to find out what was wrong with me. And my mom had colon cancer when she was 52. And kind of in the back of my mind, I was worried about it. But I didn't have, a lot of the symptoms. I wasn't losing weight. I was actually gaining weight. It kind of was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't, I couldn't believe that I had cancer. So I went in for my colonoscopy, and as the surgeon is reviewing my history, he asked why I hadn't been screened with regular colonoscopies. He was quite surprised that this was my first one. And I said, well, because I'm not 50 yet. And he goes, yeah, but your mom had colon cancer at 52, which means you should have started getting regular colonoscopies at 42 because you're higher risk. I didn't know that. My doctor didn't know that, or she might have, but she missed it. And either way, didn't change anything about me being in that table that day. And he made a joke. He's like, don't worry about it. I'm sure it's nothing. We'll probably just find a bunch of hemorrhoids and you'll get on with your life. The only thing I really remember, because I was sedated, is that right after he started my colonoscopy, I heard him say, we're going to need more sedation. And that's it. I don't remember anything. They knocked me out. When I woke up, I was in the GI unit of the Brandon Hospital. And I could hear the nurses talking to all the other patients that had colonoscopies that day, and they were saying, okay, you know what, you can get dressed and leave. The doctor will call you in about 4 weeks with the results of your biopsy or whatever. When the nurse came into my little cubicle, she said, is your husband still here? Because the doctor would like to talk to you both. And that was the moment I knew something was wrong. I just knew. My husband came in, we looked at each other, and when the doctor came in, he said, well, we found a tumor. I can't say for sure because we got to biopsy it. I sent it for biopsy. Can't say for sure if it's cancer, but based on my experience, I believe it is. But because the tumor is so large and it's so close to your anus, so it's less than 1 centimeter from your anus, he says it's going to have to be surgically removed, whether it's cancerous or not. And because of where it is, you're probably going to end up with a permanent colostomy. 5 minutes. Cancer, surgery, colostomy. My whole world changed on August 1st, 2024. Can't even, a whole new podcast talking about what that ride home was like that day and how we told my 4 kids and all of that kind of stuff. But that was August 1st. He said that it was going to take about 2 weeks to get the biopsy back, and in the meantime, they ordered a bunch of tests. So between August 1st and August 16th of 2024, I had an MRI, I had a CT scan, I had blood draws. And on August 16th, we went back to see him and spent an hour in his office when he confirmed that the tumor was indeed cancerous. It was stage 3, there were some lymph nodes involved, so it had already started spreading. He told us that based on current protocols, it was probably going to be chemo, radiation, and then surgery, but he doesn't know because that wasn't his specialty. He was referring me to a specialist in Winnipeg who is on the cancer tumor board and specializes in colorectal surgery for cancer, that kind of thing, but also to CancerCare Manitoba. He assured us that this was a slow-growing cancer. They figured that I had this tumor growing in my body for 7 to 9 years. It was 5 centimeters, so the size of a golf ball, right at the edge of my anus, which is why I was having so many symptoms, because there was blockages and all of those things. I was so lucky that I was paying attention to my body and realized that, salads weren't going to cure me. And I went in and kept going back to my doctor and started talking about it, because there's a big part of me that didn't want to talk about it. Who wants to talk about the fact that their stool is floating? So from there, August 16th, he assured us it's a slow-growing cancer. He said that the protocols for this type of cancer were to really take their time to make sure I had the proper consults, that the tumor board would discuss it. I left. We had went to Winnipeg to meet with the surgeon who gave me a physical exam. I met with the chemo oncologist. I met with the radiation oncologist, and they came up with a plan. They decided that they were going to do 25 days of chemo radiation together. So I would do chemo at home with pills in the morning, pills at night, only on the days I had radiation. And we did them 25 days in a row, Monday to Friday. So drive into Brandon for radiation, home, chemo in the morning, chemo at night. Now, I was really lucky because that type of chemo, I didn't lose my hair. It thinned, and I still don't quite know what to do with it. It's kind of growing back, and it's thinner, and I don't know. It's a struggle. But I didn't lose my hair. I didn't lose any weight. Nausea and all the side effects of chemo were mild and managed with, THC and CBD. I came through it really well. I had some radiation burns and some side effects from radiation. Now I still am dealing with some side effects, urinary tract issues due to radiation and things like that, but minor. It could have been a lot worse. So I started chemo and radiation on November 14th. So 3 months after my staging and my final diagnosis. Now, during those 3 months, I wasn't just sitting around waiting and doing nothing. We had tests, we had appointments. And I am so grateful. Like, this was a slow-growing cancer. If it was more aggressive in my life, or organs were at risk of, if they thought that this was going to spread, it would have been dealt with a lot faster. But because it was slow-growing, we had time to really get the consults and really get the testing done. And for myself, I had the opportunity to mentally start to deal with this diagnosis. I left work after 6 weeks. I spent time with my family. I did a lot of meditation, and I really started to come to terms with this diagnosis and a lot of research. So by the time I started chemo and radiation in November, I was fairly ready. I was strong. I was prepared. We were going to go to battle. My goal was hoping that the chemo and radiation were so successful and I could do everything I possibly could to support that treatment so that the cancer would disappear and I wouldn't have to have surgery, because I was dealing okay with the idea of cancer. I was not okay dealing with the idea that I might have to have a colostomy for the rest of my life. And that's what really drove me, was to really embrace chemo and radiation and get rid of the cancer. So that went on for about 6 weeks. And my final treatment was just a few days before Christmas in 2024. Now, the effects of radiation and chemotherapy are kind of cumulative, and the worst effects of radiation are only like a couple weeks after you're done. So they had told me that I needed to recover from chemo and radiation, and I think it was like 12 or 14 weeks or something like that. But during that time, they were sending me for another MRI and another physical exam by my surgeon to see how the cancer reacted, see what the effects was. I was hoping for 100%, right? I was hoping I'd get this scan and it'd be like, hey, it's gone. That wasn't the case. Chemo and radiation did shrink my tumor, but only by about 40%. I didn't react very well to it. It was good, but not good enough to spare me from surgery, because now the cancer was still there. It was still going to continue to grow, and it was already in the lymph nodes. It could spread, and it was, a couple years maybe, and that would be it. And now I've had more radiation in my pelvic area than, I probably ever can. So if there's no more radiation allowed. So it was surgery, and I really wanted to avoid it. I said, can't you just give me more chemo? Can't you just get rid of this? And I talked to the doctors, and I talked to the surgeon, and the surgeon said, yeah, we can try. We could give you like 6 months of really heavy dose chemo. And if you respond 100% and the cancer's gone, then we just monitor you. And because if it comes back after that, it's going to come back angry and it's going to be aggressive. So we need constant monitoring. He says, I don't think it's your best shot. I'm trying to save your life and you need the surgery. And of course, me being the cynic that I am, I said, of course you think I need surgery because you're a surgeon, right? That's what you do. So I talked to my chemotherapist, and I don't think that's the right word for it, chemo-oncologist. And I said, okay, you're the chemo guy. Should I do more chemo? Like, if this was you, would you do more chemo? And he said, no, I would do the surgery. You didn't respond very well to the first round of chemo and radiation. And the risk of side effects with heavy-duty chemo are really great. And if you have those side effects and still have to have the surgery, it's going to be harder for you to recover and your quality of life could be diminished. So yes, if it was me, I would have the surgery. Now, when your chemo-oncologist tells you that they wouldn't do more chemo, you gotta listen. So, surgery it was. My last radiation treatment was right before Christmas, and my surgery was scheduled for March 10th. It was the time in between there that it was giving my body to gain its strength back from what chemo and radiation did to it. And after I had that meeting, I really had to wrap my mind mentally around the idea that I was going to have a colostomy. There was a chance it could be temporary, but it was most likely going to be permanent. And I spent a lot of time talking, a lot of time meditating, writing, journaling, researching. A lot of tears were shed. And I went to see a very, very wise woman, and who's been through similar surgeries. And I just let it all out, I didn't want to live like this. I didn't want to have a colostomy and the loss of dignity. And she looked at me and she said, Michelle, maybe it's time you change your definition of what dignity is. And that really struck home with me, because I have so much to live for, so much to be grateful. I have such an amazing life, and I was ready to almost avoid surgery and die to avoid having a colostomy. And how ridiculous is that? And that's when I decided to bring this page, my podcast back to share my story. Because the idea that I was almost willing to die to avoid surgery that would end up in a permanent colostomy just blew my mind. I couldn't believe I'd mentally gone there. And so I spent time talking about it. I went public, because you know what? If you go public, there's no shame in it, because now everyone knows. And I made it through surgery, and you know what? I have a permanent colostomy. I have a Barbie butt. They literally, and that's the funny thing. I was so focused about having a colostomy, I didn't do a whole lot of research as to what this Barbie butt surgery is like, right? They literally took out my sigmoid colon, my anus, my rectum, and all of my sphincter muscle, and cut me from the perineum all the way up, took everything out, and then sewed me back up. Barbie butt, literally. There's nothing there. And I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking that maybe they'd go in through my butthole, take everything out, and just sew my butthole closed. That's not what they did. So I wasn't prepared for the intensity of this major, major surgery, because I was so focused on a colostomy. And you know what? It's been almost 5 months since my ostomy surgery. Living with a colostomy, no big deal at all. You've seen me. I'm out golfing. I'm doing yoga. Oscar, my stoma, is a part of me. He saved my life. But my butt surgery is still healing. It still hurts to sit too long. It's still very weird. And I still kind of haven't wrapped my head around it. My husband tells me my butt looks the same from the back. But you know what? I'm sure if I bent over, which I probably will never do in front of someone else for as long as I live, it probably doesn't look the same. But I'm not looking. So that's my story. That's my timeline. From August 1st, I had a colonoscopy. March 10th, my cancer was removed. And when we got the news that they sent everything for a biopsy after that surgery, and I think it was in April sometime, that they called us in to give us the results and said, hey, guess what? You're done. It's gone. You're not in remission. It's gone. They cut it out. The surgery was a success. My ostomy saved my life. Now I go in once a year. I'm going to get tested to see if it comes back, but it's low risk of returning, less than 20%, because I had that surgery. So even though it seems like, when you hear it, it's like you waited 3 months before you started chemo, that's a long time. There's something wrong with our healthcare system. No, that was protocol for my kind of cancer. And I am so grateful to CancerCare and to my incredible medical team for this last year. It's not just given me my life, it's given me a new perspective and a new lease on life. So that's it. That's my story from start to finish. Well, not really finished, because who knows where I'm going to be now or where I'm going now. All I know is that I'm going to keep sharing my story, because it's important that people understand that they need to get tested, that a colonoscopy sucks, but it doesn't suck nearly as much as having your butt sewn shut. So get tested, get screened, talk to your friends, talk to your doctor about your symptoms in your digestive system. We tell our kids when we're potty training that everybody poops. And you know what? Everyone does. So stop acting like it's something, that shouldn't be talked about. We need to talk about these things. And if you're like me and have or are facing ostomy surgery, temporary or permanent, talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because you know what? This stigma doesn't have to kill us. I'm here if you want to talk, and let's just keep it real. Thanks for listening.
That's it for this episode of Real Talk, where we tackled the hardest conversations because they're the ones we need the most. I can't wait to hear your thoughts and opinions. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay real, stay engaged, and keep living your authentic truth.